And we'll take you first to the major manhunt for a man suspected of shooting and killing 2 police officers and seriously injuring another. The search in Victoria's northeast is centred on Porepunkah, which is 300 kilometres from Melbourne. Authorities are looking for 56-year-old Desi Freeman, who identifies as a sovereign citizen. Now, overnight, officers confirmed his partner and children are not with him and they are safe. Our reporter Leanne Wong joins us now from Porepunkah. Leanne, what's the latest there?
Well, just moments ago, we heard from Victoria Police's Chief Commissioner Mike Bush, who indeed confirmed that 56-year-old Desi Freeman still remains on the run, heavily armed and in dense bushland after he allegedly shot dead 2 police officers and seriously injured another. Police have been here in Porepunkah overnight and through the morning, of course, but right now they're really starting to mobilise. We, just as of moments ago, were kicked out of the command post. You can see it quite a ways away in the distance behind me because we've been told that a police helicopter will be landing soon. We've passed several units decked out head to toe in tactical gear, dressed in camo, armed with bulletproof vests and helmets, all gearing up. We've seen multiple K9 units. There is a Bearcat, that is a heavily armoured black vehicle that police use. We've also seen several dozens of officers on site. So it really seems that this search really is once again ramping up as the search for Desi Freeman continues after he allegedly killed those officers at a property in Rayner Track, not too far, just down the road from here yesterday. 10 officers yesterday went to that property at about 10:30 in the morning to serve a warrant on Mr. Freeman related to historical sex abuse offences. It was then that they were ambushed and Mr. Freeman allegedly killed a 59-year-old detective and a 35-year-old senior constable and seriously injuring a detective who remains in a stable condition now in the Alfred. Today we heard from Chief Commissioner Mike Bush, who said that the relatives of those killed police officers are obviously traumatised, that they're devastated. This is a very difficult search for police right now. This is difficult terrain, it is steep, there is a lot of dense bushland. We know that there are a lot of caves in a lot of these mountains. Porepunkah itself, the town, remains in lockdown, as well as a lot of the nearby residents around there while this search continues. Here's what Chief Commissioner Mike Bush had to say today.
To be vigilant, keep yourselves safe. Please don't go outside if you don't need to. We will do everything to find this heavily armed individual. But if you see anything that arouses your suspicion and you think we need to know, please ring 000 and tell us immediately.
Now, this deadly attack has obviously been felt quite deeply here in Porepunkah and right across Victoria, as well as the rest of the country. Porepunkah is a very tight-knit community. A lot of these people who live here, the emergency services workers, police, fireys, SDS volunteers, they all know each other. So right now they're definitely grieving the loss of these 2 officers. Just earlier today we heard from the Premier, Jacinta Allen. Here's what she had to say about that attack.
Every resource is being devoted to this manhunt that's underway right now.
Leanne, what can you tell us about Desi Freeman?
Well, Desi Freeman identifies as a sovereign citizen. He was born Desmond Philby. He was raised in Melbourne and later changed his name to Freeman when he became a sovereign citizen. This is quite a fringe movement. It takes in people who are anti-government activists as well as conspiracy theorists. They believe that the government is illegitimate. They don't recognise a lot of the institutions and laws that we all abide by, you and I and everyone else. They also have a deep mistrust and contempt for law enforcement. Desi Freeman himself had several run-ins with Victoria Police in the past, most notably back in 2021 when he was arrested outside of Myrtleford Courthouse. That's not too far from here, it's about half an hour from where I am now, when he attempted to prosecute then Premier Daniel Andrews on treason charges. Most recently, he was also in the Supreme Court last year when he brought an officer to court after his driver's licence was cancelled for 2 years, and it was then that he described police officers to the court as terrorist thugs as well as Nazis. So really quite a contempt there for police officers. Police obviously right now really trying to find Mr. Freeman. The search is continuing and really a lot of resources being thrown at the search.
Leanne Wong reporting there from the scene at Porepunkah, Victoria. Thank you. The Iranian government has described Australia's moves to sever ties with the regime as an assault on diplomacy. The Iranian ambassador has been expelled after Australia's domestic spy agency found Iran was behind at least 2 anti-Semitic attacks in Sydney and Melbourne. Political reporter Nicole Hegarty joins us now from Canberra. Nicole, what's been the reaction to this decision in Canberra?
Good morning, Gemma. Well, this is the first time since World War II where Australia has moved to expel a diplomat, an ambassador, and then in this case 3 diplomats as well. This following the revelations yesterday from ASIO and the government that Iran, through the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, was involved in orchestrating these 2 attacks using a number of proxies, the 2 attacks being the firebombing of the Adass Israel Synagogue in Melbourne in December and also of Lewis's Continental Cafe and Restaurant Adeli in Sydney's Bondi region. That Iran was ultimately responsible for this and then did engage a series of intermediaries to carry out these attacks. Following on from that, we've heard quite a number of comments from both the government and the opposition backing in this decision. This is not the first time that a Western government has moved to expel an Iranian ambassador or to list the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organisation. That second step also being committed to by the government yesterday, following in the footsteps of many other, as I say, Western countries in doing so. We have heard this morning from, again, both the government and opposition, who are both supportive of this decision and say the behaviour that has been demonstrated and the involvement of Iran in these attacks, not just on Australia's Jewish community, but Australia as a whole, is utterly unacceptable. Take a listen.
We have no reason to believe that the people who are actually conducting the actions had any idea who had started it. That doesn't change the seriousness from the Australian government's point of view that Iran was still involved.
And it draws a very red line in the ground for any country, in fact, who would consider conducting foreign interference, espionage, sabotage, or indeed even targeted killings on our soil.
The Israeli government has suggested that this move by the Australian government is in response to retaliation from Israel over Australia's recent moves to ban several members or revoke the visas of several members of the Israeli government from entering Australia, as well as to move to recognise a Palestinian state. The Australian government says this is not the case and that this decision yesterday is of no relevance, or is not linked to its previous announcements when it comes to Israel and Palestine as well, Gemma.
At Parliament House, thank you. And with more reaction, I'm joined by our reporter Max Tillman, who is outside the Sydney bakery targeted in one of those attacks. Max, what's been the reaction like there from the local Jewish community?
Good morning, Gemma. Well, it's been a palpable sense of shock. In fact, only minutes before we went to air, a woman who identified herself as a member of the Jewish community told us that she has real concerns not only for herself but her children as well. And that's obviously after the revelations that we've been hearing this morning that ASIO believe there could potentially be a link between the Iranian regime and the firebombing here at the Lewis Continental Kitchen on October 20th of last year. And this part of Sydney, particularly here in the eastern suburbs, is an enclave of the Sydney Jewish community. And there are real concerns from people here. But essentially what the sentiment is they're shocked but not surprised is definitely what we've been hearing. But just for a bit of context on what that actual firebombing was itself, we know from New South Wales Police that they've charged Syed Moussaoui, who's believed to be a former head of the Nomads bikie gang over the alleged firebombing here in October. The firebombing itself caused more than $1 million of damage to the cafe. What we understand from New South Wales Police is they'll allege that Mr Moussaoui was responsible for orchestrating the attack. He essentially used two other associates who were also before the courts in order to firebomb the presidents. What we also understand is that there'd been essentially a case of mistaken identity in the days before. We understand that two other associates of Mr Moussaoui had effectively accidentally struck the wrong premises, the wrong business here in Sydney's eastern suburbs, striking the Curly Lewis Brewing Company, not far from where we are now in Bondi. And that particular business has no links to the Jewish community. Now, the Lewis Continental Kitchen is not only a kosher cafe, but it's also owned by a Jewish family. And we were hearing earlier from Alex Reichen, he's from the Executive Council of Australian Jewry. He says not only has he been in contact with the family who own the business, but he's also been picking up on the wider sentiment of the Australian Jewish community. Let's take a quick listen to what he had to say.
There was no surprise really, but also, it still brought us a great degree of shock to know now definitively that this regime, which is responsible for so much misery and bloodshed, that is capable of such atrocities, honed in on our Australian Jewish community and committed attacks on Australian soil. It's a very disturbing thing to learn, and having spoken to the owners of one of the businesses that was targeted, they found no comfort in this. They were really rattled by this revelation.
There we go. So that's the sentiment that's really being echoed across much of the Australian Jewish community. We've also been speaking to locals here from the eastern suburbs who say that they're shocked by the revelations. Let's take a quick listen to what people had to tell us.
I find it pretty frightening. I mean, I was born here, I grew up here, and the anti-Semitism's just horrible.
Most people are a bit weary of what's going on, and it's affected mainly the children because their parents are worried that someone might do something against the children.
You want everybody to feel comfortable and safe where they live, and for anything like that to happen, in a safe place like Sydney, coming from America, I wouldn't say is ever good.
Now, court documents seen by the ABC show that Mr Moussaoui allegedly told his associates he was being paid $12,000 in order to execute the firebombing on this particular premises. He's been charged with not only orchestrating the firebombing itself, but orchestrating a criminal group. Now, he's pled not guilty to those charges, as well as the other two men who are believed to be responsible by New South Wales Police, who are also before the courts. We've also heard from Mr Moussaoui's lawyer yesterday, who has strenuously denied that their client knew of any involvement with the Iranian regime, and obviously these investigations will continue.
Max Tillman reporting there from Sydney. The initial findings of an Israeli military investigation into a deadly attack on a Gaza hospital have failed to acknowledge troops fired on the building a second time. It struck as emergency crews were retrieving the bodies of some of the dead and injured. Middle East correspondent Matthew Doran is in Jerusalem.
The outrage over the dual attacks on the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis continues to grow as Israel faces accusations it's breached international law, not only opening fire on a hospital, but killing journalists in the process. The initial findings of an internal Israeli military investigation have been released, but they leave more questions unanswered about strikes which killed 20 Palestinians, among them 5 journalists. The public statement from the IDF says that troops in Khan Yunis identified a camera at the Nasser hospital, which they said was set up by Hamas to monitor military movements. But they haven't provided any evidence for how that conclusion was reached, other than to argue Hamas regularly uses hospitals to shield its activities. International news agencies have multiple live cameras set up across Gaza, providing skyline and street scenes. The IDF says the decision was taken to open fire, and that's the attack which killed cameraman Hussam al-Masri, who'd been operating that camera for news agency Reuters. What the statement doesn't address or even reference is the fact there was a second strike on exactly the same location moments later, an attack which hit emergency workers and journalists who'd rushed to the scene, a tactic referred to by many as a double tap. Israel claims 6 terrorists were among those killed, but it hasn't provided their names or any other details as to who they are. The Israeli military's chief has directed the inquiry to continue, looking into who authorised the strike and under what circumstances. But even before this statement was released by the IDF, the United Nations was casting doubt on whether this inquiry would go to the heart of what happened in Khan Yunis.
Targeting journalists is forbidden, but also targeting hospitals is forbidden. It's, of course, the responsibility of Israel as the occupying power to investigate. But these investigations need to yield results. There needs to be justice. We haven't seen results or accountability measures yet.
It certainly appears that what the IDF has said so far shows that prediction may ring true. The full investigation may provide more of those answers, with Israel promising transparency and insisting it only targets Hamas. But what has been seen so far will only fuel accusations that comments such as those are hollow.
A bill to set up Queensland's first child sex offender register is set to be introduced to Parliament today. The proposed legislation, dubbed Daniel's Law, would list the names, ages and photos of reportable offenders online. Reporter Mark Rigby joins us now from the Gold Coast. Mark, how did this legislation come about?
These laws were a pre-election commitment from the Queensland LNP during last year's state election campaign. They're now part of a raft of changes to the state legislature that the Queensland government is calling the Making Queensland Safer laws. These changes in particular, as you say, have been dubbed Daniel's Law in honour of the 13-year-old Sunshine Coast boy Daniel Morecambe, who was abducted and tragically killed back in 2003. As you say, this legislation would see a website established listing the names, ages and photographs of reportable offenders who fail to meet their obligations to contact police or keep in contact with police and whose whereabouts aren't known by police. Another aspect of the legislation would allow Queenslanders to search for the images only of high-risk offenders living in their area. The Queensland Premier, David Crisafulli, has been very clear about why he thinks these laws are needed.
I understand that there will be those who say, well, what about the rights of those individuals? I just take this view that the rights of parents and the rights of children have to come first ahead of the rights of predators, ahead of the rights of monsters. And this is another tool that people can use, and they must use it responsibly, but it's another tool they can use to keep their kids safe.
Daniel Morecambe's family, who've been advocating for improvements to child safety laws since his death, have welcomed the change. They say while it won't solve all issues related to child exploitation, it may go some way towards deterring offenders. That legislation, the Queensland Government hopes to pass through State Parliament before the end of the year.
Mark Rigby there on the Gold Coast. Thank you.